Hello, everybody, and welcome to Paul and Ted's Talk Time. I'm Ted, this is Paul, and today we're talking about a difficult subject, the subject of depression. Tricky one, Paul, today, isn't it?
Yeah, but it's one that the World Health Organization acknowledges as being 5% of the world's population
Yeah.
afflicted by it.
20% of everybody between the ages of 16 and 25 apparently have had some kind of run-in with depression at some point. That's a huge number, isn't it?
Yeah,
Just goes to show.
I mean, I know of people, close to me that have been afflicted by it.
Mm-hmm.
And in fact, if you think about it, I mean, I would hazard a guess that there are probably not that many people who are afflicted by it who you don't know somebody who is afflicted by it.
Well, I see what you mean. Yeah,
rather like cancer. Everybody knows
yeah,
somebody.
we all know someone. Yeah.
I mean,
I'm sure. Yeah.
Can you think of somebody?
Well, yeah, my father. I mean, my father unfortunately, met an early death, and he was diagnosed with a state of chronic mental depression. So yeah, him. Of course, he died when I was very, very young, so I never knew him. But yeah, I'm sure, and various families and people I've met over the years, for sure, definitely, and you as well, I imagine.
Yeah. I mean, I unfortunately I had an uncle who came to a very nasty end, very sadly, and I mean that's the extreme end of the scale, isn't
Sure,
it?
sure, it is. Yeah, but very real.
So what is it?
Good question. I did a little bit of the typical sort of googling it, and I came up with a whole bunch of different types of depression. They listed up to 9 different types, and I thought, well, okay. And then I went on to look at what are the cures, and of course there isn't really a cure, but you can moderate the whole thing and with meds and stuff, and yeah, it's all pretty bleak. And I think the important one is to have a look at the actual symptoms. Are we able to be able to pinpoint what the symptoms are? How can you tell if somebody has depression?
Well, again, I mean, I'll refer back to the World Health Organization. I think they cite a number of triggers or symptoms of change in appetite, restlessness, feelings and thoughts of suicide, despair, loneliness, bleakness. And I've talked to several people who've been afflicted by this, and it's a very, very dark place to be in. Once you're in that depressive state, it's almost like the feet all curl up in a ball, and it becomes very, very bleak. And I've known of people who can't lift their head up off the pillar, literally can't lift their head up off the pillar, because facing the day is just too much for them.
I mean, I had a close friend who suffered from this, and she described it as being trapped in a glass box, and you can see everybody outside of the glass box.
Yeah, I've heard.
And everybody
this,
going about their life in a normal way, and you're inside, and you have no contact with the outside at all, and
no voice. You're in a goldfish bowl.
Yeah, that's bad, isn't it?
And you're screaming, but nobody's hearing you. And I think you're kind of trying to find a way out of this by finding a voice. And I've just got that image, that very famous painting of Scream.
Yeah.
I've just had that image come into my mind now, and that's
the silent scream.
Yeah, the person inside not being able to to resolve their problem, or even understand it themselves. It's almost like they're possessed by something which they don't have any control over. And this is what makes it even worse.
Sure.
Yeah.
Sure. Well, I was watching earlier on today one of those TED Talk videos, not to be mistaken for the Paul and TED Talk, but this
Mustn't do that.
No, mustn't do that. And there was this guy who actually is working as a sort of on a suicide hotline, working near the Golden Gate Bridge, the one which separates San Francisco from the mainland, or whatever one. And this is where people tend to sort of home in to go and sort of jump off and commit suicide. And one of his jobs is to be on the hotline, and when somebody is about to jump, he goes out there to try and talk them down. And he said that, the percentage of being able to talk people out of it is pretty good. But he said that the most important thing is the fact that listening. You're not the one talking. You have to listen, and the feedback he always got from people who went on to have a proper life after changing their mind about committing suicide was the fact that they said, well, the big change was that you listened, nobody else listened. Yeah.
In fact, I can relate to that very much, because when I was younger, I actually was a volunteer for the Samaritans, and
Well, that's good.
And I underwent their training.
Oh yeah.
And of course, it's all about, as you say, listening. Just diverging slightly. I mean, listening is a huge skill.
Yeah, and it's not for everyone, is it?
It's not for everyone, because so often people are just thinking about the next thing in their head that they want to say, and they're really not listening.
Right.
Whereas, a person in a depressive state really needs you to listen intently and not to be judgmental.
Right. Obviously.
And it's amazing what can come out if you allow a person to just unravel and find their own voice. And that's another thing, silence. People are afraid of silence. They think it's awkward. But often it's very, very useful, particularly in situations where you're actually listening.
Do you think that's something we could put forward and say, well, if you knew somebody who's in a state of depression, or you think they are, to go and perhaps say, here I am, I'm here to listen to whatever you have to say. Is that something?
Absolutely. For me, yes. I claim to be no expert, but yes, absolutely. Don't make any judgments. It's very hard not to do, because we're all full of judgments.
Right.
But just to listen and be with that person in the moment.
Yeah, in the moment,
definitely. And let them know that you're there. And it requires a lot of energy,
Okay, so take it one step back. How are we going to identify somebody with depression, do you think? What would be, in your experiences, what would be the first thing which would sort of highlight, or let's say sort of give you the idea that maybe this person has some problems, and maybe this is something.
Well, it depends if you know the person or you don't.
Well, I will assume that you do, because
Okay, well, then a change in behaviour.
Okay, in what respect, perhaps?
Forlorn, withdrawn, tired, not wanting to engage in normal, regular activities. That,
Are these sort of like little telltale changes or major changes, do you think?
I think they can be extremely subtle. I think they can be both.
Yeah, interesting, isn't it? I mean, to think that probably we're surrounded by people who are sort of on the edge of this kind of condition. Yeah.
I mean, I've had a lot of contact with people with bipolar.
Okay, I was going to come on to that actually, because this is one of the 9 different types which I looked at of depression, and of course the main one is your what we would, for want of a better way, say normal, major depression. How would bipolar differ from this?
Well, again, I'm no expert, but I think it's the the swings.
Yeah, the manic, the manicness. Yeah.
I think if you are afflicted by this very severely, I mean, you're literally going sky high
Right.
and going rock bottom, and I'm sure that you get varying degrees of that, you
Yeah.
know,
Yeah.
in its manifestation.
Yeah, absolutely. I think, most people, if you look at your moods, sort of over time, it would be like this. You'll have a slightly good day and a slightly down day. Like yesterday was a down day for me because my football team lost. And today was a slightly better day. So these are like small sort of little, little humps along the line. And I think if if you're suffering, bipolar, you've got these huge ups and massive troughs.
I think one thing that you can be aware of, or try to be aware of, is monitoring yourself, your own behavior more closely. I mean, we tend to just drift through our day, especially if you live alone.
Keeping an eye on yourself.
Keeping an eye on yourself, I think, would be helpful.
Okay. Yeah, go on.
And asking yourself also, certain things that you're doing, asking yourself, is this good for me?
Okay.
Is this behavior good for me?
The behavior, or what you're actually doing day to day?
Well, it could be what you're thinking. It could be what you're doing. It could be who you're associating with.
Sure.
I mean, the whole cabangle, isn't it?
But if you're thinking about yourself in this respect, does this mean that you feel that there are warning signs about yourself? Or is this a sort of a general sort of housekeeping thing,
I think it's a general housekeeping thing that you can try to apply, but unfortunately, once depression and its ravages get hold of you, it can be a very slow and gradual, tortuous decline into this well and depth of despair, and you can slip into it with not really knowing that you are doing so. You just perhaps, not suddenly, but you find yourself, you're in bed and you don't want to get up. You don't really know how you got there.
One of these nine different types of depression I read about was one, and I forget what it's called. I could look at my piece of paper, but I'm just going off the top of my head. It's the one where you actually have depression for a period of time, usually 6 to 8 months, of feeling generally low most of the time. And then you kind of snap out of it, and then you have an elongated period where you don't have it. It sort of comes and goes. And I read, do you take medication? And if you take medication, do you have to keep going on the medication? And they said, no, you do this for the period of time when you're afflicted by this. And then after that, you kind of wean yourself off the meds and try to get back to normal again.
I think for me, speaking personally, and I've had my moments of depression, as I'm sure everybody has,
And you'd label that as depression, a blanket term, or would you pinpoint it to a certain type of depression?
Well, I'm kind of getting onto that, because what I was going to say was, I was going to mention about how I got myself out of it.
Oh, okay.
And usually it's by acting on it.
Yeah.
So, for example, what a trigger. We all have triggers which can send us into this decline of despair.
Somebody says, or some bad thing happening, or
you can lose your job. Okay. Somebody can say something nasty to you.
Okay.
Somebody can hurt you in another way. The triggers are endless.
Okay, and
very personal.
Yeah, and then it sends you down.
And then you can
plummet.
Plummet. Yeah,
Right.
It's like somebody pushing you down a bobsleigh or something. Off you go into this well of despair.
But you know that you're in a position where this can happen to you before. It doesn't suddenly all of a sudden happen. Over the years, you know that there's a propensity for this to happen to you on various occasions?
I think as you get older, I think you can start to identify that.
Mm-hmm. I see.
But for me, what has worked is if I can catch it, and when I say catch it, stop it before it, gets its ravages on me. Is that the right word?
Yeah,
Ravages,
I think so.
it claws into
Yeah,
me,
definitely.
if you like.
So how would you do it?
Well, I've learned that over a number of years, what has worked effectively for me. And one of the things is, here's an example. I've lost the job, right, in the past, and I don't have or didn't have a lot of money. So suddenly I'm feeling very naked. I'm feeling very exposed, very fragile, very vulnerable, and that can trigger a whole tidal wave of other, negative feelings and thoughts, right?
Of course. Yeah.
But if I say to myself, and I've done this in the past, kind of stop, go out and get yourself a job. Now, I know this kind of is sounded like I'm trivializing it. I don't mean it's that easy to go out and get a job. What I'm trying to emphasize here is you've got to act on it, and things will materialize. In other words, if you sit at home and do nothing, it's going to get worse.
Well, on a micro level then, let's say somebody says something to tip you off. Somebody says something and it sends you down and you start to feel low. How do you knock that on the head? I mean, losing a job is a kind of a major thing, like losing a family member or something bad. But let's say a more sort of minimal thing. Is there a different sort of counteracting technique, or is it still the basic?
I think you have to find your own, the one that works for you.
Yeah.
But the danger is getting into cycles of repeated behavior patterns. So, for example, in the case that you just cited, if, say, a friend says something and it's churning you up, and there is a possibility that you might have misinterpreted that.
Sure, yeah.
So one of the ways in which you could act on that is to actually pick up the phone, have the courage to say, I need to talk to you. Is this what you meant?
Isn't that difficult?
It is, yeah. But isn't it a lot more difficult to sit and let this
fester,
and almost destroy you? And
I mean, there's a relation here with alcoholism, and we're going to do alcoholism in one of our future videos, because there's a lot of similarities, because alcohol is in fact a natural depressant, so there are similarities between the two. But yes, one can relate to that. I mean, the idea that once you get down there, it's very difficult to climb out of it. Difficult. Moving on to other types of depression, which I read about. Of course, the postnatal depression. This is one we hear about a lot. This is biochemistry, isn't it? From what I read, sort of women after they've given birth, they have these massive hormonal changes, and it causes in some cases some really severe depression.
I wouldn't exclude that totally to women. Of course, the postnatal depression is obviously
sure.
Due to women having
babies,
different
blood loss,
biological makeup,
change of hormones,
respect.
all sorts of things.
But it does raise the question of biological determinism, doesn't it? Is this something that you're hereditarily
it is
born with?
Definitely it is. They say if you have a close family member who had this, then look out, you're going to be a major player.
You're saying it definitely. That's your opinion.
It's what I read.
I'm not so sure if I go along with that.
Okay, well, they said that there is a, it's more likely that if you have a parent,
likely, but not necessarily for me, not exclusively.
And the other one, of course, is you know your experiences. Of course, mainly we're talking about childhood and various things, you know, which can happen to you in childhood, which can you know cause some trauma or some traumatic experiences which stay with you during life, and then as you go through that, you have flashbacks, and this can cause depression. Is that something you'd go with?
I would go along with that. Yeah, you get into patterns of thinking and which are not, and also what people do, I think, is they use these patterns as like scripts. These scripts become part of their personality and part of their behavior. You know, they might see themselves as a victim, for example, and that might, you know, put them on a depressive road.
As a defense mechanism, as a comfort zone, or as an attention thing. I mean, all sorts of different scenarios, no?
It could be anything, couldn't it? You know,
Yeah.
but there's no getting away from it, though. You know that it's a terrible thing. It's a terrible thing.
Another one, of course, is the situation depression. You know, something bad happens to you on a given day. You know, like somebody, a close person, and somebody close to you dies, or you have some problem in a relationship which sends you into depression. And here we have a sort of it's a sort of little bit isolated compared to the, how we say, the major depression, the bipolar, the psychosis, which are all major mainline depression.
Manifestations.
Yeah, it's, you know,
labels or
all sorts of things going on there at the same time. I think, you know, if there's anything to get out of discussing depression, you know, it's to be able to identify it in other people. I think that's probably a key thing. I mean, you know, if you talk to most people, say, "Oh, I never suffer from depression." I mean, somebody asked me.
Well, that's defensive, isn't it?
Yeah, but I mean, it could also be true. I mean, it could also be, you know, like you don't have huge mood swings. I mean, just because other people do doesn't mean to say, you know, other people don't. I mean, you know, lots of people will go through life without, you know, any major things happening to them, which would cause them to get into that depressive state. But however, they can be equally beneficial to other people if they're able to identify people who are suffering or have a potential to suffer from this. Yeah. I don't think it's a, you know, it's a right across the board. I think it's lots of different things to be taken into account here. Yeah.
So what can we say to our viewers? How can we sum this up in terms of the things that might be beneficial for them to do?
Well, I think number one is it's treatable. There's a fix to this. Yeah, I mean, you know, there's medication, and there's some good medications out there. And
do you believe in them?
Oh, I think so.
Medications?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, you know, I look at my experiences. You know, used to cry out for certain medications at certain points when, you know, definitely, yeah. And
well, that's interesting, because I've had medication too when I was younger. You know, I went through a particularly turbulent time, but I never felt that I benefited from medication at all, except maybe, to use one of a better word, comatosing me a little bit, sedating me rather a little bit.
I think the meds these days for this, you know, the SSRIs, which are inhibitors for serotonin. I mean, this is an important part of depression, where you know you're able to get a hold of the chemistry in your body which causes the mood swings. I think that's huge. Yeah, I really do. So I think it is a situation which can be you can be looked after medically by this.
Yeah, and I think it's important that our viewers, you know, acknowledge that we're by no means experts in this field, as you can probably tell, but we're just two fellow human beings sharing some of our experiences in the hope that, you know, you might see something in there that is beneficial to you and help you. And of course, there are all sorts of help lines out there. And don't be alone in this. That's important.
And also, you know, you can comment on these videos.
And drop us a line.
And of course, as usual, subscribe, like it, because we're going to come up with a an awfully large, wide range of topics over a period of time. So stay with us and keep watching our videos.
And we'll see you soon.
See you soon. Right. Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.